Let me take you inside a courtroom where silence isn't peace, it's pressure. Where a billionaire just refused to rise for the youngest black federal judge in Virginia. Cameras were rolling, the nation held its breath, one woman didn't flinch, one man thought he was untouchable. But what happened next wasn't just legal, it was historic. A gavel fell, a power was shaken, and a war of truth versus influence began. If you think this is just another trial, think again. Because what started with defiance is about to unravel an empire. Ready? Good. Let's begin. 8:57 IEM. A heavy spring fog clung to the streets of Fairfax, Virginia. Outside the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia, cameras clicked like machine guns. Reporters jostled behind barricades, their microphones aimed at the courthouse steps. Above them, a lead ticker scrolled in red, "The People versus Preston Kincaid." Inside, the courtroom was a gallery of silence and spectacle. Preston Kincaid, billionaire mogul, Wall Street's golden wolf, sat at the defense table like it was his private lounge. Tailored navy suit, rare Rolex glinting under the lights, a smirk stretched across his lips. He leaned to his attorney and whispered, "Let them film me. The show's about to start." At precisely 9:00, the side doors opened. Judge Aaliyah Monroe entered, black robe flowing, heels clicking like punctuation across marble. Her face, calm as still water, her presence, electric. The courtroom tensed. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Everyone stood, except Preston. Judge Monroe didn't flinch. She looked directly at him. "Mr. Kincaid, in my courtroom everyone stands." Preston barely tilted his chin. "Not for you." He raised a hand mockingly as if dismissing a waitress. His words cut through the chamber like broken glass. Gasps rippled. A few cameras clicked, catching the moment. Aaliyah Monroe didn't blink. Her gavel came down, sharp and final. "Remove him from my courtroom." Two bailiffs moved. Preston's smile faltered. "You touch me, you'll regret it," he snapped, rising just enough to recoil. The courtroom froze. Then chaos. The bailiffs seized him, firmly but legally. Chairs scraped, lawyers whispered frantically. Preston's voice echoed as he was dragged out. "Do you know who I am?" Outside, cable news cut in. "Breaking: Kincaid ejected from courtroom." Within minutes, Twitter trended. "Monroe v. Kincaid." Inside the courthouse, Monroe adjusted her robe and sat down as if nothing had happened. From the bench, she murmured, just loud enough for the room to hear. "Justice isn't earned by money, it's enforced by truth." The metal door slammed behind him. Preston Kincaid spun inside his private holding cell, knocking over the chair with a furious kick. "I want my phone! I want out!" His voice cracked, no longer the polished tone of Wall Street's favorite billionaire, but a man cornered and stripped of command. Martin Ellsworth stood just inside the threshold, calm but pale. "Sir, Judge Monroe has a reputation. She's not for sale, not for pressure. She's the kind that burns careers." Quietly, Preston's eyes blazed. "Then I'll ruin her another way." And he meant it. Within hours, his call reached Dominion News Network. "I want headlines. I want outrage. Make her a symbol. Now." By morning, they delivered. TV anchors spun the story. Radical black judge targets white job creator. Social feeds swarmed with talking heads and trolls. Podcasts echoed, "Bias bench. Kincaid framed." TikToks dissected the courtroom footage frame by frame, spliced to paint Aaliyah Monroe as an activist judge with a vendetta. But inside the courthouse, Judge Monroe kept walking, black robe flowing, eyes ahead. She didn't flinch when whispers followed her down the hall. She didn't stop when emails flooded her inbox. "Step down while you can." Behind closed doors, Chief Justice Warren Bishop offered a quiet warning over coffee and marble floors. "The court is under fire, Judge Monroe. I can't protect you if the media turns this trial into a battlefield." Ethan Delgado, the prosecutor assigned to the case, pulled her aside after a hearing. "I admire your stand, but I'm scared you're going to be the headline casualty." Outside, America watched. Some jeered, but others rallied. "Stand with her" began trending. A news crew followed Monroe from courthouse doors to her car, one anchor whispering, "She's walking through fire." That night, Monroe sat alone in chambers, the lights dim. Her reflection stared back from the window pane. Tired, unshaken, her hand rested on the gavel. She whispered, not to anyone, but to herself. "You're facing the system, but who stands when you fall?" The temperature in the courtroom wasn't just cooler that morning, it was glacial. Not from the air conditioning, but from the shift in tone. Dominion News was still running looping segments painting Judge Aaliyah Monroe as a radical in robes. The public pulse was split, sharp as ever. Inside a private conference room at the courthouse, Preston Kincaid leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on Martin Ellsworth. "You don't have the stomach for this," he said flatly. "You want to win clean. This isn't a clean fight." Without waiting for a response, he flicked his hand toward the door. "You're done." Martin opened his mouth, then thought better of it. He left in silence. Preston made a single call. No theatrics, no shouting. Just a whisper that cut. "Bring in Troy. It's time." By 10 o'clock IEM, Gavin Troy entered the courtroom. Slate gray suit, no smile, eyes like polished stone. He didn't speak to anyone except the court clerk, papers in hand. Before the second gavel of the day, he stood. "Motion for immediate recusal," he said, voice calm but deliberate. "Due to demonstrated bias against financial institutions, we move to disqualify Judge Monroe on grounds of systemic prejudice." Gasps echoed. Aaliyah didn't flinch. She read the motion silently, then set it aside. "Motion noted," she said, and continued the session. That night, alone in her office, Aaliyah found the envelope. No return address, no signature, just 6 words in slanted handwriting. "Step down or else." She stared at it a beat too long. Her fingers folded it once, then again. She slid it into a drawer and turned the key without a word. The next morning, Detective Miles Garrison arrived, gruff, suited, with a weary badge and a sharper instinct. He walked into her chambers and placed his ID gently on her desk. "I'm not here to watch a trial," he said. "This feels like a takedown." Later that day, Chief Justice Warren Bishop summoned her to his office, paneled in oak and tension. "Cole's legal team wants you gone," he said, voice heavy. "You're on thin ice." Aaliyah rose slowly, spine unbending, eyes steady. "Then I'll learn to walk on it." The courtroom felt like a powder keg, tense, unpredictable, too quiet. Gavin Troy walked in with an air of quiet victory, a slim folder in his hand. No theatrics, just a predator walking through familiar territory. "Your Honor," he began, placing the folder on the bench. "We submit new evidence that Judge Monroe previously had financial ties to Artemis Equity, an investment firm that once directly competed with Alton Coal Capital." A ripple moved through the courtroom. The defense bench buzzed. Outside, headlines flared. Bias confirmed? Conflict of interest? Within minutes, reporters flooded the courthouse steps. Judge Aaliyah Monroe scanned the folder, stone-faced. She didn't blink, didn't breathe. Her fingers brushed the gavel, but she didn't lift it yet. The chamber waited. Then, bang! A single gunshot tore through the stillness. Screams shattered the air as the gallery exploded into chaos. Court officers lunged toward the sound. Jurors ducked. Lawyers scrambled. No one was hit. The bullet embedded itself in the paneled wall just above the jury box. High enough to miss, close enough to warn. Through the shouting and panic, one man didn't move. Preston Kincaid sat still, legs crossed, watching it all like theater. His lips curled slightly, as if the bullet had said everything he wanted. Monroe remained crouched, hand clenched around the gavel. She slowly rose, eyes tracing the smoke line to the wall. Not fear, just a cold, sharpened clarity. "This wasn't random," Ethan Delgado whispered, leaning in. "It's a message." Later, Detective Miles Garrison played back the security footage. Frame by frame, they watched a man rise from a back row seat. One assigned earlier by a courtesy email from Gavin Troy's assistant. Garrison shut the laptop with a snap. "They're not just manipulating the system," he told Monroe. "They're threatening it." That night, Aaliyah returned to her office, stripped off her robe in silence, and stared out at the courthouse lawn. Her eyes burned, not from fear, but from focus. She opened her drawer. The anonymous letter still sat there. With a match and a steady hand, she burned it. The flames danced. "You want war?" she whispered. "Then come for it." It started with a headline, "Inside Kincaid's Empire," but within minutes, it became a firestorm. Truthwire Media dropped a 30-minute investigative special, and the internet did the rest. Audio of Preston Kincaid threatening a whistleblower, hidden camera footage from his estate, cigars, champagne, and men in suits whispering bribes like bedtime stories, offshore transfers, spreadsheets, black budget slips. It wasn't just a scandal, it was a reckoning. Hashtags exploded. Truth not threats. Stand with Monroe. Power is not proof. Clips of Judge Monroe holding her gavel with unshakable calm flooded TikTok. Twitter reposted freeze frames of Preston being removed from her courtroom. On Instagram, influencers wore shirts that read, "The gavel doesn't flinch." It wasn't a trial anymore. It was a movement. In a dimly lit press room, Gavin Troy faced a swarm of cameras, sweat glistening beneath his collar. "This is fake news, orchestrated by radicals," he claimed, voice tight. But reporters didn't buy it. "Where's your rebuttal evidence?" one asked. He had none. Even Dominion News, the media machine Preston once owned, blinked. Their website scrubbed all Monroe attacks, issuing a rare retraction, pending further verification. The cracks in the empire had become fault lines. Then came a rare interview. Chief Justice Warren Bishop appeared live on CNN Local. No notes, just truth. "She stood firm when others would have folded," Bishop said. "Judge Monroe didn't just uphold the law, she reminded us what it stands for." Meanwhile, in a concrete holding cell, Preston slammed his fists on the table. "I want her destroyed," he shouted at Troy. "Wipe her off the bench." But 1,000 miles from his rage, in a modest apartment in Richmond, a woman opened her laptop. Amanda Poe, former assistant to Preston. She had watched the news in silence. Then she typed a single sentence. "I have everything." Patched, call logs, offshore transfers, voice memos, surveillance clips. She hit send to the FBI. For the first time, the tide had turned. Judge Monroe wasn't just surviving, she was winning. Not with speeches, with evidence. The storm didn't end with headlines, it bled into hallways, into hard drives, into sworn testimonies. As the trial roared on inside Fairfax's federal courtroom, the FBI moved in quiet. Armed with Amanda Poe's files and encrypted data provided by the anonymous hacker known only as Firewall, they opened case after case across multiple states. The charges were no longer isolated fraud. They now painted an empire built on bribery, intimidation, and international laundering. Preston Kincaid hadn't just broken the law, he had sculpted his wealth from its bones. Inside the courtroom, the world held its breath. Preston entered in a tailored navy suit, tie perfect, hair impeccable, cuffed wrists, hidden beneath custom sleeves. He didn't walk like a man headed for sentencing. He sauntered, chin high, smirk intact. His eyes locked with Judge Monroe's, silently daring her to flinch. But she didn't. Not today. Aaliyah Monroe sat steady on the bench, black robe crisp, her gavel resting lightly in her hand. When she finally spoke, the entire room leaned in, not because her voice was loud, but because it didn't need to be. "Justice doesn't scream," she said, her voice even, deliberate. "It strikes in silence." The room fell into absolute stillness as the jury foreperson rose. She didn't hesitate. "Guilty, all counts." No applause, no gasps, no flashing bulbs, just silence, heavy and final. It wasn't about spectacle anymore. It was about truth. Outside the courthouse, the collapse unfolded swiftly. Dominion News Network, once Preston's media machine, was hit with a defamation lawsuit. Sponsors pulled funding. The lead anchor resigned on air. Stocks plummeted. Alton Coal Capital was seized by regulators. Its board resigned en masse within 72 hours. The name Preston Kincaid was no longer spoken with power, but with infamy. Weeks later, Truthwire released a documentary, Monroe, the Gavel That Didn't Break. Millions watched it. Teachers showed it in classrooms. Protesters printed her words on signs. On a late afternoon in Fairfax, golden light streamed through courthouse columns. Aaliyah stepped outside, briefcase in hand, coat over her arm. She wasn't smiling for the cameras. There weren't any. A small voice broke through. "Are you the lady who beat the billionaire?" Aaliyah paused. She turned, knelt slightly, and gently squeezed the little girl's hand. "No," she said, calm and kind. "I just reminded him he couldn't beat the truth." As the girl beamed up at her, the screen faded to black. Words appeared, white on silence. "Power with no honor is just noise." Some viewers cried, others sat stunned, hearts still. Not because they had watched someone win, but because, for once, justice had held. In the end, justice is never about noise, it's about clarity. It doesn't always arrive with applause, but with stillness that speaks louder than pride. The truth doesn't chase power, it outlasts it. What we've witnessed is more than a trial. It's a reminder that integrity isn't a weakness, and silence isn't surrender. Sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones that never shout. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you see the system in a new light, don't keep it to yourself. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you define justice. And if you're hungry for more stories where truth takes the stand, be sure to like, subscribe, and join us for the next case. Because in a world full of noise, truth always deserves the final word.